Tyreek Hill. The man. The myth. The enigma. The Dolphins' biggest weapon. And perhaps their biggest liability. And let's be honest, the Miami Dolphins have a decision to make. A painful one. A decision that separates contenders from pretenders. Champions from wannabes. They have to ask themselves, is this worth it? Is the circus worth the act? Because no matter how electrifying he is on the field, no matter how many times he turns a routine slant into a foot race that only he can win, there is something lingering in the air. A cloud. A distraction. A weight that Miami can no longer afford to carry. If the Dolphins truly aspire to hoist a Lombardi trophy again, they must come to grips with a reality that isn't pretty, isn't easy, but is necessary. They have to move on from Tyreek Hill. It's not an easy thing to say. In fact, it sounds downright blasphemous at first. The man is a generational talent, the kind of player that defensive coordinators lose sleep over. You don't just find speed like that. You don't just wake up and replace a guy who can shift the entire geometry of a defense simply by stepping onto the field. And yet, for all of that, the question lingers. At what cost? There was a time, when the Miami Dolphins were a franchise that didn't just tolerate distractions, they eradicated them. They didn't build around volatility. They exiled it. You think Don Shula would have let this slide? You think the same man who ran one of the most disciplined, no-nonsense teams in NFL history would have entertained the constant off-field noise, the social media antics, the headlines that have nothing to do with football? Not a chance. Shula's teams were built on execution, consistency, and an unrelenting pursuit of excellence. The distractions, they were left at the door or shown the door. But times have changed, haven't they? Today, we celebrate personalities as much as performances. We excuse missteps if they come wrapped in highlight reels. And in doing so, we allow cracks to form in the foundation. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Tyreek Hill is a crack in Miami's foundation. The numbers? Oh, they're breathtaking. The production? It's undeniable. But success isn't measured by how many SportsCenter clips you generate in September. It's about what happens when the lights are brightest, when the moment is at its most unforgiving. And when that moment came last season, where was Tyreek Hill? Was he the difference maker? Or did Miami, once again, find themselves coming up short when it mattered most? Let's talk about money. Because this isn't just about talent. It's about the salary cap. It's about the reality that Miami has tied up an enormous portion of its financial future in a player who, let's be honest, has a ticking clock on his effectiveness. Speed like that, it doesn't last forever. And Miami is on the hook for a massive payday over the next few years. Think about what that money could do elsewhere. An elite offensive line to protect Tua. A defense that doesn't just bend and then break. Depth at key positions that could withstand the inevitable grind of an NFL season. Instead, Miami is all in on a player who, for all his brilliance, has moments where you wonder if the juice is still worth the squeeze. And here's the thing. There would be takers. There would be teams that would love nothing more than to add Tyreek Hill to their arsenal. Teams that aren't one piece away but two or three. Teams that need the kind of star power he brings. If Miami were to make that move now, they could get value, draft picks, cap relief, a chance to build something sustainable instead of something flashy. But if they wait, if they hesitate, if they let this play out another season or two, only to find themselves in the exact same place they've been, knocking on the door but never stepping through it, then what? Then the value diminishes. Then the contract becomes a burden instead of a weapon. Then Miami finds themselves looking back, wondering why they didn't see the writing on the wall when it was right in front of them. There's something almost poetic about the fact that Miami's greatest success came in an era defined by discipline, teamwork, and the absence of distractions. The 1972 Dolphins weren't the flashiest team. They weren't built on one superstar carrying the load. They were built on cohesion, on a system that worked, on a group that was greater than the sum of its parts. Fast forward to today, and what do we see? A Miami team that is trying to climb the mountain, trying to find a way back to relevance, but constantly tripping over the very thing they're supposed to be relying on. Tyreek Hill is supposed to be the answer. But is he? Or is he just another chapter in Miami's long, frustrating history of being almost good enough? Because here's the reality. Miami needs more than a highlight reel. They need an identity. They need a culture that isn't just about star power, but about championships. And sometimes, the hardest decisions are the ones that define a franchise. So here's the question Miami has to answer. Do they want to be remembered for making the tough call, for choosing long-term success over short-term excitement? Or do they want to keep rolling the dice, hoping that the same formula that hasn't worked yet will suddenly yield a different result? The time is now. The decision is clear. The Dolphins must move on from Tyreek Hill. Not because he isn't great, but because they must be greater. Because the ultimate goal isn't to be a good team. It's to be a championship team. And to do that, sometimes, you have to let go of the things that are holding you back. Even when they run a 4.240.